Okay, I'll wait for a couple more people to like get settled and then I'll start, okay? Because it seems like people are still filtering in. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming to my talk about thematic puzzles and thematic puzzle design. This is going to be a talk analyzing thematic puzzles. I'm Aster Fialla. I'm a genderqueer illustrator, interactive fiction author, and longtime fan of IF in general. So before I get started, I want to say if you want to follow along with my slides, I've put them up at my website, asterfialla.com/NarraScope23. So if you're looking at your phones, I'm going to assume that you're looking at my slides. So I'm excited to get in the meat of the talk, but I want to tell y'all a little bit about how I got on this kick in the first place. So let me take you on a little journey. A day or two before Thanksgiving 2016, I told my friend Marika Perry about a random dream I had where you combine disparate clues in some sort of mystery-solving video game. So, although the dream was mostly nonsensical and would have made a pretty bad game by itself, we agreed that little kernel was compelling and impulsively, immediately decided to develop the idea into something real. Fast forward 2 years and our game Erstwhile did really great in IF Comp 2018, won an award, blah, blah. It was great. But what I really want to focus on is this one review we received. It's on Emily Short's blog, but it's from an anonymous by request friend of hers. By the way, if you're sitting in the audience or in the Discord, anonymous reviewer, please feel free to, email me or something. I'd love to know who you are. One sentence from the review stuck out to me like a glowing sign. Making the player an active participant in the creation of a story may be a primary characteristic of IF, but making them an active participant in creating the backstory, especially in this way, is much less common. This immediately caught my attention and has haunted my brain rent-free ever since, because I hadn't noticed this aspect until the reviewer said it. We designed a game where the singular puzzle of piecing together memories reinforced the theme of being haunted by the past on accident. That and the inspiration from going to NarraScope 2019 myself are how I got started on this road. I wondered, do other games do something like this? Not the specific execution that we did, but the overall effect of a game's theme and puzzles aligning just so? As you'll find out in this talk, the answer is yes. But, so what? We did something cool and it worked and people liked it. Analyzing's fun, postmortems are great, but why am I focusing on the specific aspect of theme and puzzles, not only in Erstwhile, but in other games? Well, I believe game puzzles aren't just game puzzles. Not only can they be much more, but many of them have been much more for quite a long time. Not just in affecting or reflecting the events of the plot, but reinforcing the overall narrative themes. We know that puzzles and mechanics are intertwined. We know that mechanics can be intertwined with narrative themes, cough, cough, ludonarrative, but I've personally struggled to find analysis of this last link in the trifecta. And I think it's incredibly important to do so. As we develop our understanding of games as not just entertainment, but as art, we should fully analyze all pieces of what makes games into games and how those pieces can all make art. Since I've had trouble finding existing analysis frameworks for this theme-puzzle connection, I've developed my own. If you know of any other frameworks than mine, I invite you to email me, and my email will be at the end of the talk. Now, here's the outline for the meat of it. Basic definitions will be the basics of what I mean when I talk about the theme and puzzles of thematic puzzles. Then I'll define thematic puzzles themselves. I'll give the step-by-step on how to break down thematic puzzles, and we'll get to some actual examples, which are Erstwhile, Rosa, and Metamorphoses. I'll be providing the necessary context for those who haven't played these games. And if you're worried about spoilers, I assure you that there's still surprises to discover in each game, and you should give them a look yourself. First, the basics of what a theme is, what a puzzle is, and according to my framework. So, everyone knows what narrative is, right? The events, plot, and, well, story of a story. But what about theme? Themes are the topics of a narrative, love, death, power, magic, etc., and what that narrative is stating on a meta level about those topics. All narratives have a theme of some sort, all of them, because they're written by people, and we'll put messages into any old thing, intentionally or not. Note that there can be, and often is, a difference between what the narrative is stating versus what the author intended to say. We're focusing on the former, what the narrative is stating. Topics are the central, broad ideas that the story focuses on. There can be many topics of varying importance in a single work. A romance novel is probably going to have love as a topic, but by themselves, topics don't make themes. A theme must have a message involved that the work is imparting to the audience. Usually these can be phrased like statements in logic, such as treating one topic as equivalent to another or describing a cause and effect. For example, maybe power is addictive and leads to corruption, or love is an action, not a feeling. Or maybe power can be good if used carefully, and love is a lie by Big Chocolate to sell more Valentine's chocolate. Different narratives can have different messages about the same topic, meaning they have different themes. Let's see. Themes take the details of a specific situation and generalize it into a belief applicable in context outside of the story itself. Take the story of Little Red Riding Hood. She's told by her mother to stay on the path when she goes to her grandmother's house. She encounters a very nice wolf and tells him where she's going. He suggests she picks flowers off the path instead. While she's busy, he runs over to her grandma's house, eats her grandma, and then tricks and eats her. In the version by Charles Perrault, that's where the story stops. The end. But what does each element in the story represent? They aren't just the specific red-hooded little girl in the story, the specific hungry wolf. They represent more general concepts. All little girls, all strange, unfamiliar people who would hurt them. Little Red resolves the dilemma of whether to listen to her mother or the wolf. In other words, she makes a choice and gets eaten, a bad ending. The narrative and Poirot believe that the fate of Little Red applies to other situations where little girls are tempted to talk to wolves. To review, narrative themes are a topic or central idea, plus a message that the narrative says about the topic. Story elements like characters and events can be abstracted to broader concepts, and the narrative's specific situations are actually claiming general beliefs about the world. Next, narrative puzzles. These are obstacles presented by the game, which are overcome using the game's mechanics and understanding of the puzzle's narrative context. Unlike tests of pure skill, such as sneaking, combat, or fishing, puzzles test your knowledge or understanding. While they don't have to be outright logic puzzles, they should have solutions and outcomes that make sense in context. Understanding information previously given by the game should make solving the puzzle easier than brute forcing or guessing. As well, there should be ingenuity involved on the player's end, not just understanding information you've been told, but extrapolating that information into a solution the game didn't outright tell you about. Narrative puzzles require you to not just understand the game's mechanics, but to understand the fictional situation and come to a conclusion about what to do next. As seen in this narrative puzzle example from Phoenix Wright, although this sentence about cross-witnessing a parrot makes perfect sense in the narrative context, I promise, it makes no sense otherwise. If you're not paying attention to the narrative in a narrative puzzle game like Phoenix Wright, then you can't solve its puzzle. Puzzles should also inherently involve meaningful choice. For example, let's say one of these buttons opens this locked door and one of them doesn't. There's at least one right answer which removes or changes the obstacle, in this case unlocking the door, and there's at least one wrong answer, which leads to a different result than if you chose right. Even if the result for getting it wrong is nothing changes, try again, you're still here faced with a locked door. If you don't have meaningful choice, the players' decisions all have the same result, both buttons open the door, well, that's not really a puzzle, is it? There's nothing to solve. Players often get frustrated with this, and while frustration can be used to great effect ludonarratively, that lack of agency is what prevents situations like both buttons opening the door from being narrative puzzles. And speaking of ludonarrative, this is just a quick note to get it out of the way. Thematic puzzles are not the same as ludonarrative. Ludonarrative is the way a game's mechanics interact with the intended narrative themes, but puzzles are not the same as mechanics. They are challenges that the mechanics and narrative context help you overcome. If mechanics are the left side, then puzzles are the right side. So while ludonarrative mechanics can facilitate thematic puzzles, they're separate concepts. In my framework, I've broken down narrative puzzles into 7 pieces. The premise is what the actual challenge to overcome is. For example, needing to open a gate, convince someone to do something, or escape a curse under time pressure. Mechanics are the ways you engage with the puzzle from a gameplay standpoint. For example, fiddling with knobs on a switchboard, going through dialogue options, or transforming objects with a science beam. Narrative justification is the in-universe reason for why the puzzle exists and why the player character needs to engage with it in this way. For example, a powerful device is shut off to you, so you need the combination to activate it. The enemy is too powerful to fight directly, so you need to overcome them a different way. Clues are written in a dead language, so you need to translate them. Prerequisites are the knowledge, skills, and even items you're supposed to obtain so you can solve the puzzle, and how you obtain them. For example, learning someone's language by talking to them, learning magic spells and effects through experimental casting, or trading the right items back and forth to get machine components. The solution is what you actually do that overcomes the challenge, both figuring out what actions need to be taken and taking the action itself. This is where the ingenuity comes in. If the player figures out the solution, the player character has an easier time enacting the solution and overcoming the challenge. For example, getting someone to revise their statement by noticing a contradiction, picking the right directions through a maze by decoding the map, or using the right item on a boss by understanding the boss's weakness to the item. The sacrifice is a physical or conceptual resource you have to give up to solve the puzzle in a certain way. This can include both getting the prerequisite and enacting the solution. This becomes far more relevant with puzzles that have multiple solutions, which usually make you sacrifice different things for each solution. For example, to gain one person's favor, you have to hurt someone else. You have to spend more time and effort calming down the monster than it would take if you fought it directly. The outcome is what happens after the puzzle is solved. What is the resolution and ending to the scenario as a result of overcoming the challenge? What are you rewarded with for solving it in this way? For example, you get a unique ending, you gain an ally, you discover a new area to explore. To review, narrative puzzles test your knowledge and understanding, not just logically, but within the context of the story. Narrative puzzles involve meaningful choice regarding removing the obstacle or not, and they can be broken into premise, mechanics, justification, prerequisites, solution, sacrifice, and outcome. Whew. Time to combine these concepts. Let's move on to thematic puzzles. Thematic puzzles are narrative puzzles which support and enforce the overall themes of the game. The details of a narrative puzzle's aspects can be generalized into a thematic belief that's applicable outside of the specific puzzle, such as other puzzles in the game narrative outside of puzzles, or real-life situations. The overall themes of a game can be established by things like lore, plot, characters, mechanics, and other gameplay elements, etc. The puzzle is thematic if it fits with the greater themes established by these elements. To actually identify and break down a thematic puzzle. 1. Identify the pieces of the narrative puzzle. That's the premise, mechanics, narrative, justification, etc. 2. Abstract the puzzle pieces into their symbolic and conceptual meanings, what general ideas they represent. 3. Convert the details of the puzzle into topics using the symbolic meanings as a guide. 4. Figure out the messages the puzzle states about the topic by seeing the way the puzzle pieces, both the details and the symbolic abstractions, and the topics are connected. These are the themes of the puzzle and factor into the rest of the game. 5. Look at the themes of the rest of the game. If the themes of the puzzle agree with, support, or enhance the game's presented themes, then the puzzle is thematic. That was a lot, so let's go on to concrete examples so you can see what this actually looks like. Erstwhile is the game I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, which I co-wrote with my friend Marika Perry and released in the 2018 Interactive Fiction Competition. Aside from it being what kicked off my interest in this topic, I know its themes back to front, which is why it's first up. In Erstwhile, you play a murdered ghost named Mort, trying to figure out which one of your good, beloved friends killed you. Mort has all of his own memories, but neither he nor you know anything about his friend's wants, desires, or relationships because he was too self-centered in life to care. Erstwhile's overarching thematic puzzle is solving your murder. In my own analysis, I identified these themes cropping up in the puzzle, which are internalizing people's perspectives, relationships, and the things they value will lead to understanding the past, and understanding the past will lead you to the truth. But how did I get there? Let's go step by step. 1. Identify the narrative puzzle pieces. The premise is solving your murder despite being a ghost. The mechanic is, instead of talking to people or collecting clues on the crime scene, you collect mental clues by entering people's minds and seeing what they find important. You can link clues gathered from different minds to reveal memories. The justification for why the puzzle exists is, and why this is a mystery at all, is you're too much of an asshole to have known people's motives for killing you. And you have to solve it using these mechanics because you're a ghost and can't do traditional investigation, but you can see their minds with ghost powers. Prerequisites for the puzzle are having clues to combine and the narrative context to understand what the clues are and how they relate. You collect these clues initially by entering people's minds. Narrative context is gained through exploring minds and linking clues, and this unlocks memories between people and more clues. The solution is understanding the final link between clues to solve the murder. Although the clues you need to link to reveal the murderer are actually available near the beginning, the final link is only allowed after you gain enough of others' memories about each other and you. This is done by linking previous clues to narrow down subjects. In this and the sub-puzzles leading up to it, you pick 2 clues which are narratively established to match, contradict, or fit another pattern. Then you link them together in Mort's mind via seeing memories and deducing how the clues are connected. The sacrifice you make is time and effort to truly understand the narrative context to link clues, as opposed to brute forcing every possible clue combination until one works. This isn't a huge factor because there's only one solution to this puzzle, but still, if you don't pay attention, the murder solution will make way less sense. The outcome of every link you make is unlocking more memories, which add more clues and narrative context to your mind, enough to eventually possess and accuse your killer. 2. Abstract the elements into symbolic and conceptual meanings, just like we did with Little Red Riding Hood. So, murder is horrible, and you need to figure out what's going on with your murder. The premise of solving it can be abstracted as something like fully understand a horrible truth. The psychological concept of theory of mind is understanding people's mental states as different from your own, and you're literally going inside people's minds. The clues are objects like notes, sigils, and ties that other people remember as significant, which you didn't realize were connected. So you can abstract the mechanics by literally thinking of it as engaging with theory of mind. If you paid attention to others' perspectives, you wouldn't be in the dark about your murder, or murdered in the first place, probably. But removing your influence from the world gives you unique abilities to understand them, their histories, and the things they value for the first time. And collecting clues in your mind is literally internalizing what people care about. You have to pay close attention to the past to see how things connect. To be allowed to make the final link, you need to get most memories and clues. In other words, fully internalize all aspects of people's pasts and the things they value, and understand all the relationships they're in to see initial clues in a new light. The sacrifice is pretty simple. Its time and effort are needed to solve the murder, so that's the sacrifice to understand people and the truth. And when you understand the relationships between the things people value, you learn more about their pasts, leading you to the truth. You may notice that the symbolic meanings that I just said sound pretty repetitive, this is fine. This means that there's thematic coherence within the puzzle. In fact, repetition can be thought as enforcement of a theme and makes the next step easier. So the next step is 3. What are the general topics shared by these various elements? Again, these are the big ideas that the story is focused on. We can identify these by finding the words and symbolic ideas that repeat most frequently in steps 1 and 2. These would be from step 1, and these would be from step 2. These don't have to be exact one-to-one mappings every time you analyze, but I've done so for this first example so you can understand a little better. What are the messages conveyed about each of these topics? That's 4. In this case, messages and topics are themes. To start simple, you can phrase them like logic statements. When you enter people's minds, you can collect clues. When you see different perspectives, you can internalize the things people value. If you collect enough clues, you can start linking them. If you internalize the things people value, you can understand the relationships between them. Linking clues unlocks memories and more clues, i.e. if you understand the relationships between things people value, you will reveal people's pasts. If you unlock enough memories, you will solve the murder, i.e. if you understand the past, you will discover the truth. In the end, I synthesized and summed them up as, well, what I described from the beginning. But I hope you can see how I got here via the previous steps, one by one. Now, do these puzzle themes agree with the rest of the game's themes? The rest of the game has themes like this. So I admit that it's sort of narratively dissonant that Mort refuses to learn anything when the puzzle is centered around learning about the past and how to empathize with people, but the themes still match up well. The game says you as Mort need to stop being self-centered and start empathizing with people's perspectives to see reality and the truth. And you start doing that by piecing together the past. You can't escape its influence on your life, or afterlife as it were. To review what we learned, here are the details of the puzzle, how the details of a puzzle abstract into a theme, and how these themes match the rest of the game. Next, Sub Rosa, by Joey Jones and Melvin Rangasamy. This is an espionage game about infiltrating the mansion of a powerful authority, the Confessor, and discovering his scandalous secrets so you can depose and replace him. Sub Rosa has more than one puzzle in it, but I'm focusing on the thematic puzzle that occurs after you found all the secrets, which is Leave No Trace. I had a good sense of the themes in this puzzle when I played it, but analyzing it through the framework that I made really clarified them for me. One thing to note about this puzzle, is that this puzzle has something unique to games, multiple endings, and I'll discuss the thematic implications of them soon. Now that we're starting to get the hang of things, I'll start merging some steps to go a little faster. So 1 and 2, identify pieces and then abstract them. Premise, leave no trace of your steps after you've uncovered all the Confessor's secrets. This is accomplished by putting every single item you've previously fiddled with, altered and uncovered, back into its original placement and state, and undoing any changes you made. So the abstraction is things being changed is evidence that someone changed them, you. So you need to basically erase yourself from existence. Mechanic, while there are some unique tricks in your inventory when it comes to discovering the Confessor's secrets in previous puzzles, what you use to erase your steps in this puzzle are the strange animals, plants, devices, and tools that the Confessor owns himself. Most of these features relate to erasure or undoing, for example, a device which reverts an object into a past version of itself, or like a vacuum. So this can be abstracted as you need to weaponize the Confessor's tricks against him. If you leave any evidence of your existence or involvement, the Confessor can trace the evidence back to you and depose you. So doing a covert operation, infiltration, and erasing it is inherently creating your own secret and cover-up. If the Confessor finds out that secret, you've left open a vulnerability he can exploit. So leaving secrets to be discovered exposes vulnerabilities. Prerequisites are remembering where things were originally and how they were placed. Understanding the nature of the mansion back to front and how its curiosities interconnect, so you can use these elements to undo what you changed. And this understanding comes from solving previous puzzles to uncover secrets. So you have to remember the original state of things and the nature of someone's power. Uh, so you need to. So the solution is putting everything back as you found it. This can get pretty intensive. For example, in another part of the game, you find a skull in a hidden prison. You need to use a magical device, basically a time machine microwave, to turn time back until it's a flesh and blood head, so you can discover one of the confessor's secrets. Also, sorry, Joey, for explaining this spoiler. But however, the magical device cannot go forward in time. That means to truly leave no trace, you have to remember and use another feature of the mansion, the rare carnivorous beetles in the menagerie. If you stick the head in their enclosure, they will convert it into a skull via good old-fashioned chewing. The microwave and the rare beetles are special curiosities the confessor has to flaunt his status and power, and you're weaponizing them against him. So you can erase evidence by using an authority's power and privilege against them. The sacrifice is time and effort, but more thematically than with Erstwhile. Unlike that game, Sub Rosa allows you to simply leave when you've gotten all the secrets without putting everything back properly, and it's certainly way easier to do this. It's laborious to figure out how to return everything to its original placement and state and then do it. For me, it took around an extra hour, maybe hour and a half of playing. But if you're careless and just hop out the window and leave, then traces will definitely be left behind you. So it's very difficult to erase the existence of a crime perfectly. Before we get to outcome, let's discuss multiple endings. So if an ending helps impart theme, what does it mean when there's multiple endings? How can a puzzle convey just one thematic message with multiple outcomes? So themes can actually be implied by the contrast between the outcomes of different actions. Let's take Little Red Riding Hood again. In one ending, she listens to the wolf and strays from the path. The outcome is she gets eaten by the wolf. But let's say she listens to her mom and stays on the path the whole time, and the outcome is she gets to her grandma's place safe and sound. The contrast between these actions and outcomes adds an extra dimension to the theme of the story. Not only should you never talk to strangers because you'll get hurt, you should always listen to trustworthy people to stay safe. These outcomes should all support some common meaning while coming at it from different angles, and this theme should align with the themes of the rest of the game. What if she listened to her mom and the outcome was getting eaten by a bear on the way back from Granny's? That contrast, or lack thereof, would imply a far bleaker theme that Perot probably didn't intend. Let's go back to Sub Rosa with this in mind and look at the outcomes of this game. How powerful and secure you stay in the epilogue is determined by how successful you were at completing this Leave No Trace puzzle. If you left absolutely no trace and put everything back exactly as you found it, the outcome is to become the new confessor and indefinitely stay in power, while the player gains their own secret about the player character. But if you aren't neat and perfect, there's multiple variant outcomes of you getting disbelieved, deposed, or killed for your carelessness. The best ending says, if you're careful and make absolutely sure that your secrets can't be found out, you'll be safe and powerful forever. The other endings say the more careless you are, the quicker your secret will be found out, and the more danger you'll be in. The topics that come up over and over are these: power, reversal, and secrets. And messages that can be extrapolated are here, based off of synthesizing the symbolic meanings. And that's steps 3 and 4. So last, you compare the themes of the puzzle and broader game and see if they support each other. Do these with the broader themes of the game? I think absolutely. The blurb describes it as a puzzle game about secrets, after all. So messages about the topics of power, reversal, secrets, and more are all weaved through the game's lore, events, characters, and other puzzles. The puzzle's themes and the game themes align almost one-to-one. This is a great puzzle that supports the themes of the game and the dimension of puzzles. Again, here's how we abstracted the details of Sub Rosa's puzzle into a theme, and we also learned how to analyze theme when there's multiple outcomes. It's implied by the contrast in results. Last, we have Metamorphoses by Emily Short. You play a slave of some sort, transported to a mysterious tower full of platonic forms and symbols. There's not much of a plot other than that, but there's a clear puzzle, which is finding the elements. In other words, the classical Greek elements of earth, water, fire, and air, and a secret fifth one, and bring them back to your cruel master. This game has multiple solutions to each puzzle, which is an extension of puzzles with multiple outcomes. Multiple solutions have thematic implications of their own. First, let's break down the pieces. By now you know the drill, right? Premise: explore the tower your master sent you to and find classical elements in the form of platonic solids within. So the classical elements of air, fire, water, earth, and a secret other fifth thing were an ancient Greek model for describing the nature of matter in the world. This is like discovering the power and nature of the world around you. The mechanics are two devices. An hourglass can make objects bigger or smaller, and a furnace that can change objects' material structure. You need to change the various objects around you by using these devices to solve the puzzles. For example, the first real metamorphosizing puzzle that you encounter is getting a key from inside a metal apple. You can get the key by turning the apple into glass with the furnace, so you have to transform the size and nature of things. The narrative justification is your master wants you to go through this task. It's not something you would or could do by yourself, so orders can make you push yourself past your limits. The prerequisites are you need to understand the way the transforming devices work and how these transformations change the various objects littered through the rooms. A metal sheet can become a leather hide. A sewing needle can become a large lever. The more you understand the nature of change, the more you can change the world around you to your benefit. But before we get to the last three, let's talk multiple solutions. Finding the themes when there's multiple puzzle solutions is similar to when there's multiple outcomes. Themes are implied by the contrast between the solutions and often the outcomes they lead to. Even if mechanically the puzzle solutions all remove the obstacle, a message can be drawn from the different ways they're portrayed. Often this includes not just the outcome of the puzzle, but what you had to sacrifice and to finish it in different ways. Once you have the prerequisite knowledge, the puzzle turns into a choice of what you're willing to sacrifice and how. This has a different nuance than multiple outcomes alone. Instead of just Y leads to Z, it's X is what it takes to do Y, and Y leads to Z. I'll use Metamorphoses itself to demonstrate. There are multiple solutions to every puzzle, but the most poignant one to me is the icosahedron, which the game associates with the element of water. There's a pulley which leads to some moderately heavy thing down in the water deep below a cistern and a hook. You're supposed to hang something on the hook that's heavy enough to pull the hook down and the underwater thing up. The most obvious solution people hit upon is using the metal ring on your character's finger, which she's had since the start of the game. You only need to use the hourglass to embiggen it to hoop size and hook it on, which pulls the hooks down, solves the puzzle, and gets you the icosahedron. But that was your mother's ring, your only valuable item left as a slave, and you don't get it back when you put it on the hook. The simplest solution sacrifices a precious thing. So when you collect the last element, finishing the puzzles of the game, you feel bitter. The game shifts to be sadder, and your eventual success feels hollow. Metamorphoses has a unique approach to multiple endings in that you can choose your own ending after you've solved all the puzzles. For example, you could return to your master or escape to a new realm. But these endings take on a different tone depending on how you solve the puzzles. In this case, no matter which realm you choose, escape is always a fatalistic gesture. However, there's other solutions to this puzzle. They require far more steps and cleverness. One that I hit upon was transforming the metal apple into a cloth sack with the furnace, piercing it with the hourglass embiggen needle, and then turning the apple back into metal and embiggening it as well. That's hooking it on, it's heavy enough, etc. That's way more effort and out-of-the-box thinking. But you feel far more triumphant with this solution than other clever, less destructive ones. Escape is wanderlust, not fatalistic. Interestingly, if you take the easy route of destroying or losing multiple objects in different puzzles, you get this oddly positive result, which is giddying freedom when you escape. With that context, let's fill out the last three pieces and ideas in the game. So the solution is there are multiple solutions to every puzzle in the game, some which are straightforward and some which take more effort and out-of-the-box thinking. So simple solutions are relatively straightforward, while clever solutions require more transformation of symbols and thought. The sacrifice is the problem with the simple solutions is that they're destructive or cause loss. Other solutions, like the apple shifting, require more cleverness, time, and understanding of how to transform things. Simple solutions require destructive sacrifice, while cleverness preserves what's precious to you. The outcome: there are no puzzle solutions that lock you out of collecting the last element and choosing your ending to the game. But how much you destroy or keep changes the tone of how you feel about your victory and the lesson you take from that experience: bitter and trapped, triumphant and obedient, or cynical and free. Transformation and destruction are two equally valid paths to higher knowledge, but you'll learn different things. Some of the recurring puzzle topics are transformation, cleverness, and sacrifice. There's a lot, actually, but I'm only selecting these three. And here are some messages that can be extrapolated from these topics. Destruction and transformation teach you different things, for example. So last, compare the themes of the puzzle and broader game and see if they support each other. Do these? I think so. They're not all one-to-one this time, but the game is full of motifs and topics, more than I put here, and many of them overlap. The puzzles tackle the themes from different angles than the rest of the game, bringing more nuance and depth. To review Metamorphoses, the puzzle abstracts to themes like this, which match the rest of the themes of the game, and we also learned about puzzles with multiple solutions. Similar to those with multiple outcomes, the theme is implied by the contrast between them. Here are some additional quick game examples of games with and without thematic game puzzles. Note that the lack of thematic puzzles does not at all mean the game is bad or worse than a game with thematic puzzles. Thematic puzzles are a tool just like any other, and they don't need to be used in every single game, so this is not a slam on any of these games. First, some fantastic puzzle games that aren't thematic. Baba Is You, which doesn't really have a narrative. Basically, in Baba Is You, you break rules and move blocks around to solve the puzzles. And you can extrapolate some cool lessons from this alone, like think outside of the box and examine your definitions and assumptions. But because there's no real narrative, there's no greater theme to support. Now, The Room and its sequels do have a narrative. You're trying to open a box and various other curious objects, and learn that the previous person who tried this descended into madness when he opened them due to a reality warping power. So there's a theme narratively, like obsessive exploration of the unknown will drive you insane. But as the player character solves the box, they don't really demonstrate going mad in either a mechanical effect or character behavior. As well, the highly logical puzzles don't really abstract into insanity as a concept. There's both a narrative and puzzle, but the latter does not support the former in a thematically coherent way. Here are some incredibly thematic games that do not have puzzles. Papers, Please is a game that, to oversimplify, is about how bureaucracy can be a tool of oppression. It does this by making you a bureaucrat in a totalitarian country, oppressing people in ways that range from rejecting them entrance due to having a misspelled name to killing them, all in the name of following orders. It's got several challenges to overcome, but it doesn't really have puzzles. Remember, puzzles involve ingenuity, and throughout the whole game, you're literally just doing what you've been told to do. Narrative choices can be made about whose orders to follow, but discouraging the player from thinking is in itself thematic. Depression Quest is a game where you play someone with depression, and it's similar. Its essential theme is having depression limits your choices, and it conveys this theme by, well, limiting your choices, as you can see with this crossed out option. There are challenges you can attempt to overcome, but these are mostly challenges of managing energy and responsibilities, with no puzzles present that will remove the obstacle that is having depression. That's perfectly thematic. As an exercise for you, after this is done, here are a few games that I consider to have thematic puzzles or have been suggested to me as such. Do you agree? What game themes do you think those puzzles support and convey? And you can email me if you have any ideas. Here's the sum up of everything we learned. Themes are narrative topics plus messages about the topics. Narrative puzzles are obstacles that are overcome using mechanics and narrative context, with the pieces being premise, mechanics, narrative justification, prerequisites, solution, sacrifice, and outcome. Thematic puzzles are narrative puzzles which support and enforce a game's themes, with the breakdown being identify pieces, abstract elements, convert into topics, identify messages, and compare themes. And all of this is important because it gives us a new analytical lens to view how puzzles can contribute to the themes of the game just as much as any other element can. So that's the end of my talk. Again, my name is Aster. My pronouns are she and or she, her, if you struggle with that. My email is asterfialla@gmail.com. I encourage you to email me with your own feedback, critique, and thoughts. And you can find these slides at asterfialla.com/NarraScope23 and find me on most platforms like Tumblr, itch.io, and co-host at PyArtsy. Any questions? If you have questions, then please go up to that mic and say them into that mic, and I'll do my best to answer them, and I'll also be checking the chat. Thank you. So if you have any questions, you can go up there, please, so that the Discord can also hear.
Hello.
Hi, Joey.
Thank you for the talk, and it's obviously very gratifying to hear my own game being analysed. I do have a question, not just a comment. Can you think of any games with puzzles that work against this theme?
That work against the theme. I can't think of any off the top of my head because I have a bad memory, but there are definitely, I think there definitely can be puzzle themes that seem like contradictory to the rest of the game. Like the game's themes have a puzzle as a narrative of like do no harm and like make sure you're a pacifist, and then the puzzles are like how do I kill this guy, which is related to the ludonarrative dissonance stuff. But again, this is about overcoming challenges, not just the mechanics of being able to kill someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
I'm sorry, I can't think of examples.
No, I put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Hello. This might be my favorite talk so far.
Thank you.
So, in my view, all puzzles have a kind of base level theme, because if you have a game that has a puzzle in it, generally speaking, the universe in that game works in a logical way and is understandable to the player. So it conveys the theme that human beings are able to understand the world they live in. They're not doomed to confusion, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if you agreed with that on some level, because you mentioned that you gave examples of puzzle games that you thought were not thematic in that sense.
So I think the key to that is the last part of my breakdown, which is I think I do agree with you that all puzzles have some inherent theme, just like all narratives have some inherent theme. But if the puzzles just have a base theme of everyone can understand the world while the narrative has a greater theme that's something more specific, then they're not thematic puzzles that fit into the narrative. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So there has to be that fifth step of fits into the greater themes of the game.
Yeah, it has to be coherent.
Mm-hmm. Coherence, yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And I'm also checking the chat, so if anyone pops questions into the chat, I'll try to answer those too.
This may be asking you to go above and beyond a little bit, but if you had a puzzle you were developing that you felt positive about in its sort of thematic cohesion, but was not working or was not testing well, what would your approach be for solving the mechanics of the puzzle and sort of balancing that against the thematic goals that you presented?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you want to see how to make a puzzle that's not quite thematic into more of a thematic puzzle?
You have an idea for a puzzle that fits thematically perfectly, but you test it and people have trouble with it, or you're having trouble working out the mechanics. how do you balance that or juggle that? 'Cause This is why I
Gotcha.
said it was going above and beyond. It's
Right.
staring at it.
So it's interesting because I actually have another talk, a much shorter one that's just like how to design a puzzle, but that's not the talk I'm giving today. I would think that lines more with like the game design of things, like making sure that it fits the narrative themes, is sort of a narrative design thing, my guess, and just making sure those cohere is kind of a long-standing problem in game design that I don't think I can answer immediately.
Totally fair.
Yeah, I do have a somewhat related slide that I can show you guys, which I put at the end. It's my secret bonus slide, which Josh Grams asked me to try to put in. So shout out to him. He's watching. I know he is. So here's my brainstormed list of ways that puzzles can support or augment topics. Remember, themes are topic plus message. My huge caveat with them is that if it wasn't clear, thematic puzzles should be built into the narrative that they're included in. These won't support themes in a vacuum, and even if you have games with similar topics, the puzzle type might not be a good fit for your story, which is sort of what you're talking about. So, and these puzzle types can be way more flexible in what topics they can be than just the ones I list. These are just my suggestions and brainstormings. But still, I figured it could possibly be helpful for you to jumpstart your own ideas, maybe. So I'm going to leave this up, and feel free to keep asking questions.
Thanks.
Hey, Aster, thanks. Super cool talk.
Thank you.
So I really liked the kind of like detail in which you broke down kind of the steps for this. And one of the things I really like about systems like that is it makes me think about like what are examples of games that like focus more or less on some of these steps. And,
Yeah,
like, maybe there aren't games that do that for certain categories, but that gives me ideas. And in particular, I wanted to ask you about sacrifice as one of those steps, because I feel like that's a thing that maybe not all games will really focus on that as a step. Like you either have to solve the puzzle or you can't keep playing. But you had some interesting examples, and I wonder if that step in particular, if there's anything you didn't get into the talk about patterns you've seen in that in games, particularly sort of like with the Metamorphoses example of like, there's like the easy way, but also like, if you want, you can like, you know, wring more sweat and blood out of trying to solve the game in like a more clever way, right? Are there any other thoughts you just have on sacrifice in general?
I do, yeah. So something interesting about sacrifice is that it has both a player sacrifice and a player character sacrifice. So if you lose, like you make an enemy of a character that you really like because you have to do something else, then that's a sacrifice that both affects the player character and kind of can make you sad if that's like your Blorbo or something. So like your favorite character. So it's something that you have an emotional attachment to, like a narrative attachment to, as a player, and that's why it's a sacrifice that matters to you, not just that matters to the player character. So in the case with the Mother's Ring, there are other sacrifices that the character can make in the game, like breaking some Venetian glass frogs, but they're not as important to the character because she encounters them in like the weird tower. They're not as important to her as their Mother's Ring, and everyone can identify or sympathize with that sort of attachment to, like, you have your family's ring. It's the last thing you really have of them. So losing that is something that emotionally hurts both the player and the character. So there's that interesting alignment between sacrifice of, like, in a in-game sense and an out-of-game sense that I think is something I didn't get a chance to super dive into, but is definitely something to think about.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So I see that there's some questions in the chat. Let's see. So someone says, what I got from the talk was more analyzing games for thematic puzzles and the lack thereof. Do you have suggestions for consciously implementing such things as an author? Would you follow the same flowchart used in the presentation to analyze certain games? So I think that consciously implementing things, I don't have a full answer other than some of these, like, as a kickstart. That's why I made this an analyzing talk and not a designing talk, because I don't actually know the answer. But as far following the same flowchart and analyzing other games, I definitely would. Like, I think as far as I've tested, it works on a lot of different like game frameworks, like seeing, is this a thematic puzzle? Is this a puzzle that's narrative at all? Things like that. So if you want to try this out and see if it breaks by playing different games, I definitely would love to hear about it. Another question is, where can I learn about your recommendations for how to design puzzles, your other talk? Is the bonus slide a taste or is there more? So this was actually a lightning talk that I submitted to NarraScope that didn't get accepted, which is fine. But it was about 10 minutes and it's just how to design logical puzzles. The short answer is you take a two concepts that are very closely connected, like a fox is the picture of a fox or something. And then you abstract them, so if the person is standing at the door and looking at it, you can add obstacles in front of that puzzle solution so that they can't see it right away. That was a metaphor. I have a talk on it, but I can submit it to another NarraScope. I don't know. Maybe I can flesh it out more later. Let's see. I think someone else is typing, but if anyone else has questions right now, you can feel free to go up. Let's see. Okay, let me just see who's talking here, and then after that, I suppose we can say that's the end of it, but let's see. Also, I appreciate your interest in the other talk. That makes me feel good. Let's see. So I think the person's, oh wait, no, I'm just typing. I will stand here for about one more awkward minute, and I can answer their questions in the chat afterward. Okay, so I'm glad everyone enjoyed my talk. If anyone else has questions, I will answer them in the Discord or like here in person. So yeah, I think that's it. Sorry for the person who's typing, but